margins are so thin right now for a farmer to take his his beef cattle and fatten it. He's paying too much for the grain to be able to fatten the cow. And a lot of these people don't have good grazing land for grass to flip it to grass fed. They just try to get it mature, and then they just fatten it up on corn and get it into the meat packer. Well, that's not working. And the guys that do that for a living, I think it's $100 a head profit right now on a cow. And they're like, that's not enough for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, so much has happened since the last time Bob and I talked. And we had pinpointed some of these 1970s freeze events. We're going to roll back around again if it had anything to do with solar activity and anything to do if it was cyclic and not because of you and me doing what we do in our daily lives. So here we are again, another month later. And today we wanted to talk about the similarities not only in the climate in the freeze events, but also in the economic events that we can look a little bit into the future and see where the food price is going. The Texas power outages should have been a wake up for a lot of people who were sort of on the fence. Is this happening or not? But secondly, I've been really digging into the destruction of agriculture. We'll discuss a little bit about that, what they're expecting for the losses, and everywhere you look across. I was digging into the FAO reports yesterday and the day before. There's nowhere that food is not going up incredible amounts. The lowest amount of inflation I found on food was 6.5%. That's the lowest. So you imagine other places at 50%, 200%. So we're so lucky to be in the States only running at 6.5% food inflation. But this does not bode well for us moving out into gargantuan crop losses from the freezes, delayed planting seasons, and expect another freeze to have a little, setback in terms of when the soil is going to warm up. So tradelikeagenius.com. Bob Kudla, as always, like to pick your brain, and here we go. I know you're all going to get something out of this, very valuable to set up your lives in the future. So Bob, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Dave, great opening monologue. Yeah, so, what's really fascinating is that we're going into a grand solar minimum, and we're at the same time setting up the stock market economic situation that what it looked like at the end of the 1960s, the beginning of the 1970s. And I think it ties also with the weather. And what we're seeing here is that terms that are being bantied about are inflationary depression, rotation into commodities. But the bottom line is we're going into stagflation. Now, I'm probably the only one, you have a lot of listeners, but in the investment community, very few people have lived through the 1970s, and I did as a child. And I was just telling my subscribers today that I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, lived in the city, but my high school was 3.5 miles away. And I played sports. And if my parents couldn't come get me, sometimes I'd have to walk home. Well, the price of oil quadrupled. And we had one car. My dad only had, enough in his budget to him to get to work and back, and the few side trips you take during the week, to take care of necessities. And I found myself, if I couldn't get a ride from a friend, walking back and forth to school. And I think people don't realize what's going to happen here. Something like that happened again. Oil is going to go from $3 a gallon to $12 a gallon. And people don't truly understand the horrific nature of what the Federal Reserve with the politicians are going to do to the middle and the poor classes in this country. Oil is hitting in the mid 70s already, and there's no crisis. This is going to be a problem, and food goes right with it. And so in 2011, they tried to, and I think it might have been Janet Yellen that was even at the Fed at the time.
She was.
So she played this game where she kept trying to soften the dollar so that they can get trade advantage. Well, it turned into the Arab Spring. because there's like 19 or 20 countries that are pegged to the dollar. Well, they couldn't afford importation of food, and it basically blew up the Middle East. And now I think we're on turbo steroids here with I would call it phase one of the destruction of the American way of life here. They're going to pop another $4 trillion towards the end of the year. And if you notice, the stimulus that they're putting together now is really focused on supporting just a few states. It's not a broad based build for the future kind of spending. This is all seed corn being consumed. And what it's going to do is it's going to drive the cost of living much higher. And if you notice today, the stock market didn't really like it. It popped and then it sold off. And that pop is it basically technical. They're creating a bull trap. And I'm expecting to see this market roll over. The NASDAQ, the growth sector did not like it at all. NASDAQ was pretty much down all day today. Those are the bellwethers. So if you have money in the stock market and you're passively investing it with a money manager, well, that money manager, without any activity on his part or her part, have put you in the most riskiest names in the stock market. And as Tesla goes, so will your portfolio, because Tesla and Apple and Microsoft and Google, Netflix, Twitter, all those are all tied into the ETFs that you're in. So you're going to start seeing stock losses at the same time your cost of living goes up. Oh, by the way, they're going to lose control of the 10-year on a short-term basis. That means forget about refining your mortgage, or if you have a loan, or if you have a business and you have term loans, all that stuff's going to go up in price. And then when they panic there, then they're going to drive the dollar down and your cost of living will go up again. So there's no more good outcomes. If they try to protect the bond market, the stock market collapses. If they try to protect the stock market, the bond market collapses, and then the people suffer. So it's just going to be a big mess. And then we have a president who's not there. I mean, literally not there. And so there's a vacuum of leadership, and you have all these fiefdoms now are going to be fighting and vying for power. So that's the setup for this. And so the good news is there's stuff you can own and buy and keep. And if you don't mind, I can share my screen real quick and show you a couple.
Yeah, let me throw in a couple thoughts there, because just a couple of days ago, I stumbled across that chart from Bank of America where they had linked all of the stimulus into that bevy of those 6 stocks that you talked about there, those 6 companies that are listed on the exchanges. It was nearly 100% correlation of how much extra money was put in to prop the market up, and how much the valuation of those combined of those 6 had gone up, including Netflix, Apple, et cetera. Shocked me. And I was like, that is impossible. But, as we come through, you'd said it so many times, we can't conjecture or, do mind and role plays on something that's never happened before. But gasoline prices have gone up 3x, 4x. So I am of the volition that even if gasoline went to $6 a gallon, food prices went up 50 or 100%, our society would start to tear apart. And when you talk about the fiefdoms and the kingdoms, and you just look through past history, I don't know how much longer people in America are going to continue to, if they're in the Southeast region or different regions. West Coast is its own thing, so diametrically opposite from the Southeast US in the way of thinking and politics. Eventually, they're just going to say enough's enough. Like, that system's not working over there. Their economy is not working. It's drawing on ours. It's taking everybody down. So it would not surprise me if we balkanized here. And like you say, the fiefdoms would tear off onto their own. But think about, before that would happen, we'd have to come into some serious economic hardship. And when people's backs are against the wall, they behave a little differently than perhaps just everyday working life. So just so many things moving forward. And I'd like to see those charts that you're talking about, because, the glimpse of what we're seeing, the whole rumblings of market, dissolving and shattering and then reemerging somewhere on the backside into a new kind of system, perhaps, including cryptocurrency and Bitcoin above 50,000 again on that pump today. So as we switch systems, will we also switch regional governments, or will it be more of a regional governmental overseership of the U.S., where it'll break up into something very similar to what the FEMA zones are, 1 through 11? Would those also be the political zones? Because these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about. Because if I'm growing food and the whole Southeast US is growing food, why would the people here in the Southeast US, in the heartland of the food being grown, pay triple, quadruple for their food when it's being grown here? You know, there's going to be a lot of things like, no, 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 no. You're not going to take the food and sell it over there and call it, you know, there's a lot of things. Oil refining too. There's to check 1,000 boxes of people are not going to continue to accept what's happening.
Yeah, for me, it's really simple. It's the revenge of the red states. So the people that are advocating these policies are, the best example I ever give people is really the Hunger Games, right? So there's 5 urban areas that are controlled by the lefted progressives that basically want everything cheap, and then they want to control your life, right? You have San Francisco, L.A., Chicago, New York, Washington D.C. Those metroplexes are all controlled by the hardcore progressives, and they're the consumers, right? So the producers live everywhere else, and those are really run by red states. Look, the political union is fine. The United States is not going to break apart. Too many people live everywhere. So, mothers and daughters and brothers and sisters aren't going to be fighting each other. It's really going to be the blue state enclaves are going to be brought to heel because they're not going to get the stuff into their region. I'll give you an example. So, you start screwing around with raising food prices. Well, those trucks may get to the city's edge, but they may not go in. Okay. And if they go in, they may get jacked, and then they won't go in again. The feds and the National Guard are going to spend more time in these cities trying to get food to the people in the cities than worrying about running around what a bunch of militia guys may or may not be doing somewhere in the Ozarks. Okay. They're going to have their hands full. And so that's my thing. It's going to be really the revenge of the producers. We've been consuming now for 50 years, and they've been suppressing the producers. And now I think the snapback's going to happen. And I'm going to show you some screens real fast of things that we're working. Yeah, so here's ANDE. So ANDE is Anderson's, and this is a company, it was an ag business company, but they do everything but grow the crops, okay? And look at it, hit 52-week high today. They run grain elevators, they do transportation, they provide insurance to farmers. See, this is the kind of business you want to be in. This is one of our programs right here. It flashed an alert. And, look at from there. And this is a really, really conservative company. And you're talking about a move right now in the last, 6 months up.
That's double.
And so that's they don't even make anything, but they enable the things that get made. Okay. So here's another company. I haven't bought anything yet because it's still too young and it's just still working their way out. This company here wants to grow everything in greenhouses. I'm sure you've heard of this guy. It's still too young. So you stay away from it until the insiders have sold out. But keep an eye on this company called App Harvest. All right. Their greenhouses are like in West Virginia to support food, vegetable growing under glass in the Northeast. And then you go down here to
Mosaic. You've been on that for Mosaic forever.
Look at Mosaic. And Mosaic's breaking it back up over the 50 of the fib. And look, this is another thing. Look, I've been buying since down here, and it's ready to take another move higher. 33.26 is my next thing. It's going to go ahead and hit over here at 37. I have a target of 50 personally. And then if you don't like that, if you want a little bit more spice in your life, you can hit IPI. This is a bit of more of a rocket ship, a smaller cap name. And so these are some of the names that are popping. And then we got one today, BGS, a food company that's been moving too, BG Foods. It had a big pop, starting to get bought again down here. It hit my oversold here. This is one of our indicators. Our algorithm is telling me, pay attention here, Bob. We're rolling off of an oversold. This isn't stochastics, by the way, people. This is a different oscillator. And we got a green on the heat map. So I'm looking for another move here. It already popped to here, but I'm looking for a move up to here. These are all the names. And I'll stop sharing so we can see each other again. Yeah. But this is stuff that I'm playing with. That's going to ignore the recession because of the food prices are going to just. I think people are going to be shocked. We've been living, Dave, too without too much crisis in this country for so long that it's just a matter of mathematics that you have this volatility coming. I don't think the American people, first of all, they're not going to know how to deal with it, and they're not going to like it. And then once they get focused on where it was caused, I don't think I want to be a politician. Now I know why they put the fence up. Okay, they're going to have people. They're going to be dealing with people that are going to be really unhappy with the decisions that they're making, that are not improving people's lives, but just causing problems. And guess what? And these same politicians will sell our pork and beef right underneath us and send it right out of the country too. So watch for that becoming an issue too. And you talk about regionalized. Texas may say, no food gets exported unless our people have enough to eat, or I'm going to cut a deal with Kansas and Iowa, and I'll send my beef north if you send your pig south, and vice versa. So the federal government is going to lose control, I believe, of the states. There's already 30 states that are run by Republicans. They've already made it clear that they're not going to abide by the executive orders that they feel that are beyond the rightful scope of the federal government. 40 states are controlled by Republican legislatures. So the fact that the federal government can control the United States is probably a fantasy that's going to be tested really soon. And you got to realize these National Guard guys, there's not like a reservoir of robots sitting underneath the Potomac River. These people come from, a lot of them, from red states. They're not going to send their people to another state to put down an uprising, especially since probably 80% of anybody in the military doesn't lean that way. So it's going to be like Romania towards the end when the troops decided not to fire on their own people. And then we're going to realize how much power the feds don't have over people's day-to-day lives. And when this food thing comes, look, what are you going to do about, now that my ground beef is $9.99 a pound when I used to be paying $3.99 a pound for it, because the guys had to kill all their cows because they couldn't get fed because corn prices are too high. People are going to become really, really good experts at why the cost of everything's going up, and it's going to point right back to the politicians basically stealing for themselves.
Yeah, and let me throw a couple of personal stories in here. I'm getting my orchard set up. So I have an orchard manager coming in to help me. We have 250 fruit trees that we're putting out. So at the same time, I've been running around to find a lot of different soil adjuvants and hitting the quarries looking for the granite dust. So I'm spending a lot of time in the seed and feed stores on the commercial level that are for commercial farmers, because I have my farm registered anyway. So I can get, I'm a farm. So I get I usually get the 50-pound bags of everything, from the fertilizers to the seed. I'm running into the same thing. You talked about the potash there. I got the last 2 bags of the 0450 out of the co-op, and it's planting season, like literally in weeks, and they still don't have that much potash in there. I'm still shocked. I got the last 2 bags of the sorghum. It's the Sudan grass sorghum, or Sudan grass, however you want to pronounce that. You can use it for silage, or if you wait, it can go to the grain on the head there. But to take the last 100 pounds out of a co-op when they're coming into the season, and I was looking at ag facts, so let me read you here. Before Bob and I were talking, I was digging into the wheat freeze injury in Texas, because I know that we're going to have to switch crops. So instead of, I'm going to do buckwheat in the beginning here for the pollinator crop on a couple acres in the back, and I'm also going to do sorghum at the same time. So I've been kind of filtering through to look at the right timing on the planting. And so here it is in South Texas. What they're looking at is the damage. It was the coldest ever recorded in some of these growing areas. So the damage that seems to be happening on prolonged freezes, stems are hollow. Like, they haven't seen this before. This injury is hollow stems. And what they're finding is that the hollow stemming is your plants are gone for the year. And even if they're coming up just they call it jointing, where it's coming out of the ground. And, it was a little bit warmer in some of these areas, so it had a little bit of growth spurt before that. Anything they're looking at, empty stems coming up through here, which is not good for yields. Also the rye, it's a little bit more, let's say, hardy toward the cold. It's a cold tolerant, but What's really damaged are the oats and the barley, and they're trying to figure out what's going to happen with the crop this year. So this is coming off the agricultural site, and they're still trying to guess at the key point on, what the damage has been done to our crops here. So even looking at these other three crops beyond the wheat, okay, wheat and corn, we know really well, but then there's all these subsidiary crops and kind of lesser, full market share crops like oats, rye, barley, the sorghum as well. Everywhere you look, it's going to be losses, losses, losses. So coming in, I'm kind of trying to put together a forecast, see how many acres have been damaged that aren't going to come back. You can't replant that and get it to cut. Winter wheat, you got one season to plant that. You can't just go, oh, we're going to plant in the spring. Could they switch crops? Yeah. But anywhere you look, it's going to be food up, and availability of farm fertilizers and seed is completely hourglassed at the moment. It's such at a pinch point right now. So if you're looking out on the long-term horizon, if we're in the middle of an ag area and it's difficult to get just phosphorus to be able to plant, man, there's a huge problem. Huge problem here.
Yeah, also too is they're having transportation issues now too, because there's not enough shipping containers. So you have like coffee is in abundance this year, but they can't get it here. So coffee prices are going to go higher. Same with cocoa. Cocoa prices are down. I guess crops up, demand's down, but you can't get it shipped here cheap enough. So cocoa is going to go up. So, it's like you can't win for losing. So, you have the grains are going to go up. And the interesting thing too is that, like I told my family, is that we're going to get these pushes where you're going to see pork prices and beef prices plummet. And they're all going to say, oh, Bob and Dave don't know what they're talking about. Look how cheap this stuff is. And the reason why they're going to do that is because they're culling their herds because they can't afford to finish them because of the price of grain. And then you're going to see what happened when we had bacon up to $17.99 a pound, and we had the shortage of beef. You couldn't even get at Costco. You couldn't even get ribeyes at all. They just were like the restaurants were. Somebody was grabbing them. They weren't getting to the stores. And remember the one year we lost. They were rationing turkeys. So for the same reason, is that the margins are so thin right now for a farmer to take his beef cattle and fatten it. He's paying too much for the grain to be able to fatten the cow. And a lot of these people don't have good grazing land for grass to flip it to grass fed. They just try to get it mature, and then they just fatten it up on corn and get it into the meat packer. Well, that's not working. And the guys that do that for a living, I think, is $100 a head profit right now on a cow. And they're like, that's not enough for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Remember the eruptions, Mount Etna in Italy? Ash traveling over the Great Lakes in the U.S. Mysterious cloud circles in Switzerland. Lumber prices adding $24,000 to a new construction home build. Why would that affect you? Well, if you're going to build a cattle panel greenhouse to protect your food as this volcanic ash starts to encompass the planet, that's going to add to your building cost as well. A new report reveals TikTok tracks you even if you've never made an account. To put this to the test, a Vice reporter downloaded and used the app but never created an account. He then submitted a GDPR request. What TikTok sent him was shocking. Everything from his IP address, what he searched online, what videos he watched, when he watched them, which were then shared with third parties like Facebook. And now, on with the video. And jumping over to Etna, the most spectacular eruption since the early 1990s? Beautiful lava displays. It looks like something straight out of a movie in the birth of the Earth 1 billion years ago. So I came across this article here, volcanic ash plume drifting over Lake Michigan from the colossal Etna eruption. The narrow ribbon, what you're seeing, that white streak that's running right almost through the center of Lake Michigan and off to the east, over tapering off in Ohio. If there's this much ash already from this small amount of eruptions, What happens when this thing continues to erupt for the next how many years? Grand solar minimum, increase in volcanic activity guaranteed every single cycle. So when volcanologists are putting quotes as, "This is pretty incredible," volcanic plumes over Lake Michigan, now that's a rare event, should send a huge signal flare into the sky like, whoa, 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 what's going on? And right on the heels of this, strange circles in the skies of Switzerland. Same days, atmospheric disturbance of some sorts. Almost looks like two of the rings from the Olympics, does it not? And you need to ask, what's causing this? And it could be electromagnetic anomaly. We're expecting electrified skies with more volcanic activity as we descend into this grand solar minimum, not outside the realm of possibility for explanation. And Pinatubo, the very volcano that cooled our planet in the 1990s, in earnest, has been raised one level alert up. Pinatubo Volcanic Bulletin hasn't been this high and raised since the last eruption in the 1990s. Taal also showing uptick, but it's just real interesting that Pinatubo awakes once again. Now they're monitoring it. So with all the other things increasing in price, we've got food going up, petrol prices are increasing. So we need to really look at lumber prices. And yes, I understand a lot of people are moving to the countryside to get out of the madness in the city, building new homes. Because it's interesting. The suppliers and lumber mills are saying it's a supply chain constriction from something further upfield. And I'm like, well, the only thing further upfield is a chainsaw and a lumber lot. So everybody's making excuses why their prices are going up so much. But nonetheless, lumber has hit $1,000, which means you're paying $1 a board foot. Now, looking at the lumber prices here from the beginning of 2020, you'd have been paying about 20 cents a board foot, and now it's up to $1 a board foot. So that's a 5x increase, but if you go back to 2018, you'll find that 3x increase comparatively. Now, how does this fit into everything? Well, you're going to need to start building greenhouses to protect your food with all the ash in the air. This sums it up pretty well. The size of this home here, the amount of lumber packaged for this home. October, it was $18,000 to build this house with the lumber. January, it was $30,000. Well, not quite double, but getting close. And then look, that same lumber pack is $62,000 today, a 3x increase. But I want to take your eyes to this, cattle panels. These are pretty easy to build. And pricing for you here, $16 US will get you one of the panel pieces. There's 4 in a row there here in East Tennessee. $80 on the paneling that's folded over that makes the hoop in the house, but now the lumber's gone up 3x. So moving forward, doing DIY projects for indoor vertical agriculture, protecting our food, and if the ash does continue to fall from other volcanoes, you're going to definitely have to move to a greenhouse to continue to grow your veggies. We are in such a conundrum right now. It's coming in from all sides. Please prepare yourselves.
So you're going to probably see more of that. A lot of these corn farmers are going to go integrated again. I would imagine you're going to see some integration back to these small family farmers where it made no sense to grow ahead of a herd of beef when you're like, you know what, hey, I could throw 20 or 30 on my farm. I won't send the excess corn to the mill. I'll feed them myself. The dynamics are all going to change. United States, you and I talked about this before. We're not going to have food shortages, I don't think, in the United States because we're too square, rectangle. We cover too many climate zones, but I think it's going to be the politics of some of the food is going to be interesting.
We're going to roll back around again if it had anything to do with solar activity and anything to do if it was cyclic and not because of you and me doing what we do in our daily lives. So here we are again, another month later, and today we wanted to talk about the similarities, not only in the climate, in the freeze events, but also in the economic events that we can look a little bit into the future and see where the food price is going. And everywhere you look across, I was digging into the FAO reports yesterday and the day before, there's nowhere that food is not going up incredible amounts. The lowest amount of inflation I found on food was 6.5%. That's the lowest. So you imagine other places at 50%, 200%. So we're so lucky to be in the States only running at 6.5% food inflation. So tradelikeagenius.com. Bob Kudla, as always, like to pick your brain. And here we go. I know you're all going to get something out of this, very valuable to set up your lives in the future. So Bob, thanks for joining me.
The margins are so thin right now for a farmer to take his beef cattle and fatten it. He's paying too much for the grain to be able to fatten the cow. And a lot of these people don't have good grazing land for grass to flip it to grass fed. They just try to get it mature, and then they just fatten it up on corn and get it into the meat packer. Well,
Bob, let me interject here just for a second. And I want to, this is so goes right along perfectly. If any of you watch Feeder Flash, Corbett Wall from DV Auctions, they do the Midwest cattle, Central Plains cattle auctions. He was saying that the packing houses right now, there's four main buyers and they're all colluding on price. And what you're talking about, that 120, it used to be 125. Now it's 100. Now they're lowballing them where they're almost losing $50 per head, depending on which area they're going. And these guys are asking for a congressional investigation into how are four meat packers able to collude to drive the price for which was a slight profit, 125, 100 per head to down into a loss right now. Oh, sickening. So they're like, this is impossible, and all the cattle ranchers out there are starting to really get a little angry on that. Now, it's not everywhere. It's certain regions. But again, if it starts in a certain region, maybe they're putting the toe in the water to see if it'll actually work, if these meat packers can collude. But how is that they can collude on price? That should be illegal for them to do such a thing. So what they were calling for was, anonymity in the pricing, because these apparently the slaughterhouses could go out there and take a look at the public pricing. So what they're saying is, hey, we need to bring that into a non-visible pricing structure for the cattle ranchers to be able to sell. So then they can't cut the market because they won't know what the price is on a daily out in the public arena. So they're asking for a lot of, institutional changes in the way that the beef cattle and whatnot are bought and sold in the pricing structure visibly in or not. And they want to pull it back so the meat packers can't see what the pricing is. So well, yeah, Corbett Wall is a really good one to watch on that. It took me a fair few, weeks and to try to wrap my head around what was happening there.
Well, but they're also Brazilian meat packers, so they can sit down in São Paulo and collude all day long, and they're outside of the purview of like they all get together for dinner down there. Who's watching them, and they can set the price. And I think. And then pork, the Chinese have a foothold in the pork. I think a lot of foreign ownership of the chickens production. So, we basically outsourced our ability to feed. I think the good news from that, though, is we're going to see a massive decentralization of slaughterhouses, too. I think what happened with COVID and what's happening now with this collusion, and I think the peak centralization is, some of the stuff is going to be good news, is that people want to be closer to where their food is made, and also to get eyeball the companies a little bit closer. And so, with technology now, I mean, look, you could dress a cow and dress a pig. Anybody of any size can buy that technology now. You can buy one of those assembly lines and you can be in business pretty fast. And you're talking about 1/10 the labor of what it used to be in terms of doing it. So it's I think there's going to be some changes happening there. And, one thing about the Biden administration, but they definitely have their eye on these monopolies, though. Okay, they're not pro-China monopoly. They're not pro-tech monopoly. They're not pro-big business monopoly. So we may see a good guy in out of this. I think the regulators are going to be a lot more active. And especially if food prices really start to go up, these guys are going to they're going to have proctology exams on them, because people are going to be watching very, very closely. So that's it's really fascinating. People don't realize the mechanics of what's going on. People just assume, hey, the farmer makes it, he raises the cost to cover his cost, goes to the middleman, they raise their cost, and it goes out to the grocery store, they raise their cost. So a lot of places, the middleman has a lot of power. You're talking about ADM, you're talking about Cargill, you're talking about Hormel, you're talking about Smithfield, you're talking about, the big Brazilian meat packers for beef. All those guys, they set the price because they have the deepest pockets. They can wait out a farmer. hey, we don't want your beef this week. And what are you going to do? You can't afford to feed it, right? So, you're going to take the lower price. And so that's always been the way. It's going to be interesting when prices start to really go. I feel the grain farmers probably are in the best situation, which is ironic because 3 years ago, that stuff, they were just pouring it on the street because they had so much extra supply. And now I think all that supply is eaten up. You know that better than I do. All I know is corn and wheat prices are through the roof. And I know the farmers that I know that were holding their corn off market are saying, "Hey, this is really good prices for my corn. I'm going to send it into the mills now because when I was selling it in the fall, it was 3.95. Now it's over 5, and I'll take it." And some of the farmers I know are actually expanding their beef herds and said, "Screw that. We'll feed it, dress it, get it to the slaughterhouses ourselves." So you're going to probably see more of that. A lot of these corn farmers are going to go integrated again. I would imagine you're going to see some integration back to these small family farmers where it made no sense to grow ahead of a herd of beef when you're like, you know what, hey, I could throw 20 or 30 on my farm. I won't send the excess corn to the mill. I'll feed them myself. The dynamics are all going to change. United States, I talked about this before. We're not going to have food shortages, I don't think, in the United States because we're too square, rectangle. We cover too many climate zones, but I think it's going to be the politics of some of the food is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I want to talk. I did an entire study and really like a 15-minute video on that USDA report where they counted all that dumped production, all that dumped milk that never made it to market because the convention centers stopped buying, the schools stopped buying, the universities stopped buying, and all the government contracts that were out for, supplying those wholesalers that then went on to those larger venues for consumption daily. They still counted that on the books as production. It's a little gray area in there that how can the USDA get away with counting that as production? Because when you looked at the levels, they showed that last year during COVID, all of 2020's milk production was equivalent or higher than 2019. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like there has to be some culpability here of real world events happening. When they're dumping half the milk out, they're still counting that as quote unquote production. Sickening. But as I will say one thing here around in East Tennessee, the model that some of the farmers are moving to this year right now is, yeah, they are raising 20, 25 head out there. And this is for Angus. And what they're doing is then selling it in the local market. And you can either buy half of a cow, you'll need to dress it yourself, or you can take it to the local butcher, but they're all backed up as well. Or you can learn a new skill on bringing your family by or bringing a bunch of people and then butchering that thing up through the day and everybody taking 150 pounds of meat home with them. That's the new model they're working to here. Sheep, goat, and cattle themselves sold right to the market, and you buy half a cow or you buy a full cow, and you're going to have to dress it yourself. Again, you hit it on the head. I think we're going to go back more regional for a lot of these things. But what kind of companies are you thinking about if we're going to go back to this sort of model of regional sales, regional production to the end consumer right within 10, 20, 50 miles of where that's being raised? Could be hogs, could be cattle, whatever. But what kind of companies are you looking at that could plug right in the middle of that and still, for you get the best of both worlds? You get the local production, but then you'll also get the gains in the market on it.
Those companies don't exist in the public market yet. So right now, what I'm seeing is that, and and if people want to trade with me, they can. So you can join our service. You can get access to those algorithms that you see on the screen, and we have a chat room going, and I throw trades out every day, so you can take advantage of what we do, and we'll teach you how to trade at the same time. You got to stay ahead of the food inflation. So for a quick plug, tradelikeagenius.com, I put together specials for Saturday, 65% off. If you want to just pick and choose what you want to look at with us, you can use promo code March, and as in March Madness, and get 45% off what's in the store. So tradelikeagenius.com. I think you'll like what we do. Definitely cost effective, very affordable, and will definitely help you make money in the markets. But for me, the way I'm looking at it now, I'm on the front end. So I like the fertilizer companies. I'm very interested in Anderson. I'm waiting for a bit of a pullback. There's another company out there called Bunge out of South America. I'm taking a look at that. But as the inflation starts snaking its way through the system, the grocery stores actually will do quite well because when they're buying their inventory at a price and they're selling it at a price X plus inflation rate. So they're getting a natural good guy, in their pricing. So if they go ahead and they buy, 100,000 pounds of beef, at an average of, $3.99 a pound. And by the time they butcher it down and get it out on the street, it might have gone up 3% or 2%. Well, that's pure profit for them because they've already outlaid for the meat, and that goes the same with all the hard goods. So they're just gonna wind their way through it, and then so you'll see companies like Kroger and Safeway do well. Hormel all morality aside, Hormel is a stock that I have a friend who's been trading it for 20 years, and all they do is sell calls against it, and then add that back into the pool, and goes up. He goes, look, inflation, I do well. Deflation, I do well. Hormel is one of those companies that do well, and then the beverage stock will do well in a recession. So those are the areas in which we're watching. I have them all on my watch list. So as they pop, we're knee deep in Mosaic right now. It's been a great trade for us. We've already had a double. I fully expect it to go to $50. There's nothing telling me it's going to change. We're knee deep in uranium. It's definitely in short supply, and then we're knee deep in crypto. So the things that I like are things in short supply, right? Food's going to be stressed, fertilizer stressed, uranium stressed, cryptocurrencies are stressed, meaning that they have pricing power. And then goes along with that is companies like Mara and Riot. They already had big push-ups higher, but if you believe in the Bitcoin story, you're going to want to own the miners that are mining it. It's kind of a way of playing an option on Bitcoin without having to outlay. I can control a whole Bitcoin value of Bitcoin without spending that kind of money because I could just buy a contract on Mara and Riot at a fraction, and if Bitcoin doubles, I get all that good guy. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. And if Bitcoin goes down, which it does, right? You can buy puts on it, and you're hedging your Bitcoin without ever touching it. So it's a beautiful thing for me. All I do is buy crypto. I don't sell it. With these stocks like Mara and Riot, you just go ahead and just buy and sell. If I could, I'll throw a screen up real quick and show this to you.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I was curious about how close do you think we are to the market top before we're going to get a correction down? Because it bounced down into the mid fours, right around 46, 47, but then it seems like it's on a tear again. I think at this time it might clear 60, above 60, but it's got to pull back at some point. Don't know what you think about how close we might be to that top before we get the real first correction, because it looks like we're on the third bump heading up right now. And then,
we're going to go, we're going higher.
Going higher. Yeah. But I'm just curious on your timing, what you think after it corrects out. Well, after that third bump where we might be on a timeline heading down after that to correct.
I think we're going to I think we'll hit 67,000 before.
Yeah.
Pull back. Like here's the line in the sand right here for a bull bear line. Okay. It could pull all the way back to 32,000 and still be considered on a bull run.
If you're tracing that line up, it goes up to 70. If you're looking at those two wave tops, if you're looking at a third wave top, then it should be pushing around 65 or 70 there. Huh?
Right here, this is my target, 66,000.
Yeah, right there you go. Yeah, you're using the fibs.
Yeah, I can do this in my head now, but that's where I'm at. But if these hit here, companies like Mara and Riot are going to be over $100. So here's Mara. So this is the big push higher on Mara right here. Okay, now it's pulling back, staying above this trend line here, staying above its bull bear line here. What you're looking for, if you're just going to be if you're an aggressive trader on it, you can buy anything down in here, or what's most likely to happen is it's going to turn back up. If it gets over the $39 area, then you have Mara going up to 62, up to $83, and then you have Riot, and so these are some of the moves I had with Riot of late, and I bought puts on this one. So see, I'm not dogmatic. I'll go long when I should go long, and I'll short it when I think I should short it. And now Riot is positioning itself for another move higher. It's hitting this trend line support area I'm just waiting for my little cheat sheet algorithm to say, hey Bob, I'm flipping up, get aggressive on ride again. As long as it doesn't break this line right here, then when this thing changes, I'm going along ride again. And I'm talking this $40 stock, you could spend 40,000 buying 1,000 shares, or you could spend $4,000 and you can control a $40,000 worth of riot. And look what it did last time here. This move here took us from 17 all the way up to 62.97. So if this ABC is what I'm thinking it's going to do, you're looking at a potential move over $100 for riot. So anyway, these are the kind of things that we show you. I'm an expert on crypto. I'm not even the crypto expert. My partner trades these. He's a miner. So he's been trading since 2011. He has this thing down cold. And if we think it's going to pull back, we tell people. So we're not, like I said, we're not dogmatic about this. We're traders. We want to make money. We'll always hold. I just hedge a different way. So when you have these tools now with these miners, it's a beautiful thing. You don't even have to get aggressive. You don't even get in the futures market and hedge. You can just hedge them with these publicly traded miners, which is a lot more convenient.
Yeah, and one last thing here. I saw Michael Saylor, I watched a couple of his talks, and he was saying, in the future, hold everything, don't sell it. A, because it's a non-taxable event if you're borrowing against it. But he feels that because the story is there's so much institutional money running into it that the laws and the ecosystem within that to allow you to borrow against your crypto holdings, whatever it is, ETH or BTC. So you won't have that taxable event, but it'll give you that equity that then you can continue to operate with as a borrow against mechanism versus a sell to take capital. And then that alleviates two things. A, you can continue to accrue, and then B, you never hit a taxable event. So that was the whole talk. And I thought that was spectacular. It's like, it's in its infancy right now. But he's like, I assure you, hold on, when there's more billions coming in, we're going to start to get to this. You'll never have to sell it. You'll continue to be able to borrow against it at a certain rate. And if it's continuing higher yearly than it is the rate you're borrowing it, and that he's like, we're off to infinity, at least the next 10 years. And I was like, all right, that sounds good. Let's keep the updates moving on that and where the development is on how you could borrow against it. It's not like make or die where you're coming in. It's similar to that of like make or die when you come in, you can borrow a percentage against and then pay back, but it'll be a different mechanism than something like make or die.
Yeah, let me explain to people how the accounting works for cryptocurrencies on the book of a private corporation. It goes on their books. It's not treated as cash, and it's not treated as currency, and it's not treated as security. So it's treated similar to like real estate. What happens is if the price of Bitcoin goes up, they don't raise the value on their balance sheet of Bitcoin, because a lot of people said, oh, they're going to go ahead and use the price of Bitcoin to manipulate their stock price. It doesn't work that way. So once you buy Bitcoin, let's say you bought it at 50,000, you bought one coin, it's on your balance sheet for $50,000. Now, if Bitcoin goes to 25,000, you're allowed to take a $25,000 impairment charge against your Bitcoin. So it's very attractive for institutions is because they can lower their taxable income as it's falling, but at the same time is then they get to store the value of the Bitcoin when it goes up. So it gives them, it's not that swinging that people are saying, oh, it's their stock prices are going to swing uncontrollably. It doesn't work that way. It's just like buying real estate. And this happened in the 80s when a lot of these corporations had real estate on their books, and real estate basically doubled and tripled during the 80s when interest rates started to fall, and all these green mailers came in and started jacking the value of these companies up so they can break the real estate groups off of their assets off their books, because the stock price wasn't reflecting it because they couldn't record it at current prices. And that's the same thing is going to happen here. If MicroStrategies has all this Bitcoin that goes to $1 million, he can't claim that difference between what he bought it for and what it's worth today. It's not going to be reflected in the stock price. It's going to have to be somebody's guess. And if somebody's going to come in and say there's an undervalued asset here, we could separate this company from its Bitcoin, and the company's worth a lot more. So that's one of the things that people are doing with it, and pretty fascinating. And also today, AXA, the Norwegian oil company, has bought $53 million worth of Bitcoin. So we're going to see all these here and there starting to pop up. There's a company out of, I think it was Singapore, that bought Ethereum on their books. And so you're starting to see that. The big five are going to, do well. You got Litecoin, you got Chainlink, you got Ethereum, you got Bitcoin, obviously, and then there's a debate on what the fifth coin could be. But if you own any or a combination of all those, you're going to be doing fine over time.
And that is the future. Yeah, it's evolving as we speak. And, there are ways to protect yourself. Every stock market crash through history, every market correction through history, every reset through history, there's been millionaires made. And, there's always an opportunity for people, even in the most dire times economically. If you can see through the veil a little bit and just bend around the corner, even a small amount of protection and hedging on your side is going to, take you greatly through all these changes.
Humility aside, I think we've been calling this right now for almost 7 years. So, we have math and we have science on our side. So we're not dissuaded by the narrative. So if you want to stay ahead of the game and survive and thrive, then it pays to really understand what's going on here a little bit better. We literally are. The change is massive going on right now. We're not going to recognize the world in 5 years, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. New vegetation index, Sahara Desert shrinking by 8% over the last 3 decades. Look into the crystal ball. Whoever controls this new grow zone is going to dominate the 21st century because it will produce the most food on our planet, more than North America. Enter the Grand Renaissance Dam. It's going to power Eastern Africa's needs to set up the grow zone along with a stablecoin, cryptocurrency, dam filling. Egypt upset, Sudan upset. Suddenly a Tigray conflict. Just one region over. And you know what? It was the old guard in that same region from 1991 to 2018 that we read about. Horrific iron fist tactics. They're trying to take power back again. And if they can break away, they get the Tekezi hydro project, 300 megawatts, same area. And speaking of the old guard, the Aksum, who controlled all the trade routes, Aksum is in that same region as well. They even minted their old gold coinage. And we're going to start right here with the vegetation index, the 1-year moving average. Starts way over in the year 2000. Far right is 2021. Which direction do you think that black line is going? Up means more vegetation on the entire planet. Plant food in the air at higher densities. That's awesome. So this came off What's Up With That, who featured the NASA Vegetation Index and the findings within the report. The Sahara is shrinking and becoming greener. Conjecture was that the North African monsoon was going to shift, push more rainfall into not only the Sahara, but parts of the Sahel, which explains why it's also in a cycle of greening and desertification over thousands of years, which indicates that we are going into a multi-thousand-year shift in the climate at the moment. And they had some exact numbers here, 8% shrinkage of the Sahara Desert over the last 3 decades. Well, in the beginning of the cycle, there's a little bit of onset, and it takes a bit more time for the shift to occur. So you could expect the second 8% to occur faster than the first 3 decades. This might occur in the next 20 years, 15 years, but it will occur faster than the very, very onset of the greening. And also a little bit further down in the article here, the entire global vegetation index surges 10% in just 20 years. Now that's for the entire globe. You can be very specific and pinpoint different locales that you're looking for. Western China, And Kyrgyzstan, that's another area that's becoming greener along with the Sahel. And this has gargantuan ramifications for politics, which we're seeing beginning to play out right now as these new grow zones are moving to different areas of either countries, continents. Also, with what's up with that, if you're interested in that kind of greening index, there's 3 more articles here about leaf abundance, fertilization, greening in the earth, and how CO2 acts as plant food for this impetus. Now back to Africa here. This is a slide out of one of the presentations I was giving about the switch in the grow zones and where it's moving to. And whoever controls this grow zone is going to dominate the 21st century because these 13.8 million square kilometers, larger than the United States and Canada combined. Plus there's double growing seasons. All it has to do is get wetter. And then you're going to need a little bit of electricity, which is lacking at the moment, and Grand Renaissance Dam inbound. 6,000 megawatts, that's a good chunk of electricity to get some agricultural production up and running. And also another quirky thing I might ask you, how reasonable does this sound? You know, we were all told that this area of the world is going to dry out into just a cinder crisp here. But look at the size of this dam that was being constructed as the same time speaking out of the left side of the mouth. It's going to get drier, drier, drier. They're building the largest dam in Africa in the exact same locations. And magically, 1 year later, it is full. That's because 2 cyclones somehow made their way out of their normal trajectory and just dumped right over that area in Afar region and filled it up. Ethiopia, a lot of rainfall coming down there suddenly with that dam. So with this dam being built, Egypt is angrier than a hornet, fears its water supply is going to be negatively impacted. Sudan, concerned about water levels and flood risk as well. Stirred up the hornet's nest on the water rights and usages further downstream. And suddenly there's conflicts all over the place. Wow, imagine that. It's all about the water. You're looking up at Tigray, which is the far north and west. And then where the Renaissance Dam is right about the center there in Gumaz, far west. And then that region right between the two, Amhara. And following and reading through the headlines over the last couple of months, Tigray conflict threatens what? The Ethiopian dam. And now just recently, United Nations is involved. Ethiopia claiming one thing, Tigray claiming quite another. Ethnic problems here, there, and everywhere. I wanted to dig into this because I know there's another dam right up there, and I thought, well, what's really going on? So I spent some time reading, like hours and hours and hours, just to find out what this conflict was about. Now, the Rwandan held the best explanation that I could find. So I'll read it for you here because the text is a bit small. The latest Ethiopian conflict was provoked by the old power elite hailing from Tigray. Now, this is the same bunch that ruled with an iron fist from 1991 to 2018. The unthinkable acts during this time, that's the same crew that lost everything and it was forced out of power with the new government being set. The old guard retreated back to their power base of Tigray, the region. Now they want the power back because the dam's there, the electricity's there. Now what's going to be flowing through that whole electrical supply? A stable coin for Africa to pay the workers and get the supplies to then build out that entire grow zone. You need electricity to have a stable coin. You need the electricity to run the pumps and everything else involved in big ag. The old power elite had the reins of power wrestled from them. They do not want to go quietly into the night because there's so much to lose moving forward. And suddenly in the same exact area that there's problems. But there's also a 300 megawatt dam up there. So if you were to grab that on some sort of breakaway, that would be a base also for a newly emerged region. Tekezi hydropower project, 300 megawatts. And as a matter of fact, it's the deepest of the dams in Africa. It might not be the largest, but it's the deepest. And then it flooded all those really deep canyons, which contain an enormous amount of artifacts and history in there from at least 10,000 years going back into the past. The region that you're looking right here contains the Tigray area and the Tekezi Dam as well. And you can see the runoff drainage basins right there. And what I found so fascinating was, as was described in the Rwandan article, the old guard, the power iron fists, the Tigray area has the city of Aksum, where you can see the archaeological ruins, who also controlled the trade routes from Yemen all the way through Mecca, through Petra up in Jordan, the frankincense routes. And you know what? They also minted their own gold coinage. After the Roman Empire collapsed, this coinage from the Aksum was the standard for precise gold weight measurements. And it's all surrounded in this region. This much history in one single place, vying for power and the new electrification in the middle of the food chain of the center of the new grow zone. On the eastern periphery of it, nothing's a coincidence like this. And I would highly encourage you to read the history of the area, especially with what was called the Old Guard from 1991 to 2018. Good afternoon, everyone. Antikytherian mechanism, such great links to track the planets of Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. They even show you the clock, and which planets in reference probably had a very great effect on our Earth. Inner gears and workings, they're not even sure how that happens. Speaking of Jupiter, 10x larger than normal auroras. Saturn the same, electrical frequency. Hey, I could also create the same effect with high voltage in a plasma medium. Steve is back, the filament rope, high charge in Earth's atmosphere. And perhaps this Antikytherian mechanism was to mark when we have greater volcanism, greater climactic weather affecting food production globally. But in the UK, they don't even want you outside viewing the skies. This Antikytherian mechanism is not a device to track the movements of the heavens. It's a doomsday clock. Saturn and Jupiter 2024. And starting off again with more firsts across our solar system. Interesting timing, grand solar minimum, increasing cosmic rays, electromagnetic effects, first time ever seen on Jupiter, and we're expecting massive changes in 2024. What coincidental timing. Birth of Jupiter's mysterious dawn storm. There's so many firsts happening across our planet and solar system now, but this is a 10x increase in the amount of auroral activity and the size of the auroras coming off of northern Jupiter and southern Jupiter. A 10x increase, that's large. A doubling would be wow, but a 10x increase? Great for Grant Cardone, 10x your money. Not so great for auroral activity on Jupiter. This activity is so intense that it's even beginning now to form other outer rings on top of this, so perhaps by 2024 this will be a 100x increase, what we're looking at here. That'll definitely be visible from the Earth. And a time step progression, watching how it morphs from an egg shape into a circle, and the layers start to build, especially where the red box is on the right. If you take a look at that, definitely looks like something off a canyon wall in Chaco Canyon or a petroglyph that we have seen through the millennia, and that's on Jupiter. Imagine when Earth's skies electrify. And you might say, oh, that's just a coincidence, but I can replicate the same effect with high voltage in plasma. Looks like intensified aurora on a northern or southern pole, doesn't it? Saturn's showing the same anomaly, but you notice to the right or eastern quadrant, it looks like it's a frequency as it's bouncing up and down. It's an electrical frequency, visible, increasing also on Saturn. And speaking of Earth skies, this plasma rope Steve with this field-aligned current wrapping down on itself with opposite charges, so visible now, so strong. This is apparently the largest, most visible, most intense aurora rope that they've seen to date. Now, can you imagine all of these three events on three different planets happening at the same time? And this mechanism tracks the same exact planets. Now, what's most interesting out of the SOT article here, the mystery of the 2,000-year-old computer, quote unquote, it's not clear whether the design is correct or could have been built with ancient manufacturing techniques. Yeah. How was it built? Because the close-ins here of the concentric rings, the rotating wheels, but the machining perfection, just like a Swiss watch. But then it says also you need hollow axes. And without a lathe to shape it, you can't do it. So how did the ancient Greeks and then suddenly stop and they didn't advance the technology? It was like a one-off and they're like, no, that wasn't good enough. No, the thing to track the heavens, we don't want to build another one of those. One's good enough. But the intricacies in tracking these certain planets, I am of the volition, this is my hypothesis of this. It is tracking when Jupiter and Saturn align with magnetic coupling to create the second Taurus wave in our solar system. When our sun steps down, huge bursting cosmic rays inbound to our atmosphere, causing more clouds, cooling temperatures. They track this because it is mappable in the heavens. And I'll bring you back to determining the cycles for these planets in the cosmos. Now, the known planets at that time, they have the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the dates to go with it. So it's an interlocking mechanism of dates. And when you look at the dates, in red are the years that each particular set of gears trails back to before it starts to cycle again and loops in on itself for a second or third coupling. They're all in the 400-year range or so, except for Mars at 284 years. But that 400-year range puts us square into grand solar minimum. So I'm not sure what they're trying to track with that. Obviously, the inbound effects of the weather and jet streams with cosmic rays increasing and electromagnetic craziness across our solar system, effects that you can see visibly with the naked eye. Now, to go to this much detail, this much time, this much effort to build something that was never built before, to track the two planets that are going to have the most effect on our Earth, seems a little coincidental, and there's a whole other reason why they're doing this. So looking at the back full view here, there's an enormous amount of unanswered questions. And how do they get the intricacies down to be able to gear that, stepping down in 480-year increments, 442, 344? They were so precise. And if you look at it in a CAD drawing format here, or a 3D layering so you could print this or create it yourself, engineering on this was equivalent to today. So I want to bring you back to the face of this thing, and this is where the most important information lies. I'm not sure how the hands and arrows indicate that we're into another one of these cycles, because I know what you're seeing here. I played with an interactive version, but it didn't have all of the different hands on the dials there that are moving around. It only had the sun and the moon on the interactive version. But I'm wondering what it'll set up like in 2024 when Jupiter and Saturn are electromagnetically connected, and they are going to be firing off in the solar system, visible to the naked eye from Earth. Absolutely, they will. Can you imagine Jupiter going to 100x on the aurora? You would see that in the night sky glowing blue. And stepping out to 2024, I'll show you this square that's forming. And the Antikythera mechanism, I believe, is mapping this squaring of the planets, creating a second magnetic field that's also going to intercouple with our own magnetic field from the sun. Earth will be in the center of two interlooping toroid magnetic fields, massive effects. I am saying absolutely this Antikythera mechanism is a clock to map the vast Earth changes that crush society and set it back thousands of years in development because of more volcanism, the inability to grow food and a regular plant and harvest date. Ancient texts talk about these same tribulations coming through different periods of time that are mappable. And you know what? In the UK, they don't even want you outside, spaced far, far, far apart, to even look at the stars, to notice the changes in the heavens, because that's what we're going to see. Perhaps you staying inside the whole time is prevent you from seeing these increased activity of red sprites, the auroral ropes, the halos and aurora on different planets that are becoming visible. Hey, everybody, stay inside. Oh, and don't talk to anybody else either. And the continuation of control over food, your access to food, standing out line, only a certain amount of people in the store, limited to how many boxes of this, that, or the other you can buy. You're probably going to want to think about storable foods during these years, because we're going through a change that hasn't been seen for at least 2,000 years on this cycle. That map that I showed you of the planetary alignment last time, 79 AD. So the Antikythera mechanism matching up, biblical prophecies matching up, timelines with solar placement of planets in the heavens lining up. There's a lot of matchups, Hopi Indian prophecies, everything's matching up to this time. Biblical surge in food prices, meteorological, logistical, political, geopolitical. Exporter stocks lowest in the last 20 plus years. Agri-commodity index, oh, we've seen those other two bumps. Contractions at both. And where you would look for unrest and hotspots are the red and the orange countries where food insecurity falls on these importing nations. Have you noticed almost everything in life has gone up in price, increases over the last year? Thinking about saving some money? Here's 29 tips for fighting inflation at home. Number 1, roast and grind coffee, along with breads, crock pots, magnetic motors. Oh, I mean solar panels so you can make your own electricity in your home. A new report reveals TikTok tracks you even if you've never made an account. To put this to the test, a Vice reporter downloaded and used the app but never created an account. He then submitted a GDPR request. What TikTok sent him was shocking. Everything from his IP address, what he searched online, what videos he watched, when he watched them, which were then shared with third parties like Facebook. Staying anonymous online so corporations can't track you is more important than ever. And the first step to doing so is using a VPN. You can head over to virtualshield.com, and in the download tab, I'm going to choose Firefox. And click Install Now to add the Virtual Shield add-on. It's just that easy. And get started with your free 30-day trial. Install it, click Connect. You'll see the shield turn from red to green. And you'll see how from my initial service provider, I was able to even change my IP. Virtual Shield Network protected. Go to virtualshield.com/adapt2030 or click the link in the description box below to get Virtual Shield today for 50% off and free for 30 days. And now, on with the video. And starting you off zero hedge on the verge of a global crisis. Biblical surge in food prices. Not something I really want to start my day with this type of article. Really in depth, though, going into Joseph and Egypt, the 7 lean years, the 7 bountiful years, filling up the warehouses to survive the famines, and they list a few reasons why food's getting scarce on the planet and more expensive. Meteorological, can you say grand solar minimum? Logistical, can you say debug? Political, that could be anything, and geopolitical, more resources. And look from Rabobank here at the exporter stocks. So any country that has extra above what they consume, exporter nations. And when I see the lowest that we've seen since 2002, we should be trending up. At least what we've been told. USDA, rosy forecasts. How was that dipping off a cliff there? Disconnect between reality and fictitious paper. But hey, markets need to be stabilized, don't they? And then a different way to look at that here, just in the United States on the supply end of what's in our warehouses in the States. Corn, wheat, soy. Why so low again from 2013-14? What happened? Again, USDA, rosy forecast above XYZ. I don't think so. But if we do take a look back at the 2 spikes previously in the agri-commodity index, none of those good. Those are massive contractions in the economy, even more layoffs, and then put on top of all this contagion, if you will, and the bug. And that spike might exceed 2011. We'll see where it heads. But with so many people out of work, oil prices rising, you're going to have to think of different solutions to be moving through these problems here, especially with the economic reset coming in. But I wanted to point out this map, which is kind of the hotspot map, if you will, based on food and insecurity. And we know how those two go hand in hand. If you're going to look for flashpoints, going to be looking at the dark red countries, the orange, and then in the periphery, the yellow. That bullet point right there describes it very well. Food insecurity falls heaviest on importing nations. Then the trifecta on top of this is going to be just inflation. Forget food inflation, just straight up inflation, incredible money printing. And you might have only thought it was in Europe or in the United States that they were printing into infinitum. But no, let's look at Canadian money supply. Kind of matching the US, isn't it? But not as drastic of an uptick like the Fed was doing, but it's all encompassing. Every country's doing it. So with that massive amount of money flooding across the planet, you can only imagine that things are going to increase in price. So taking a look at meat, cereals, sugar, dairy, and oils. Again, we're going to be exceeding that 2011 super spike. With all these other factors in play, yikes. Extreme possibilities for people on the streets asking for change. And this chart's really interesting here. Grains and oils exported to China is the dark blue. So my question is, what happens if the U.S. reins it in, brings it back down to 2018, 19, or 1920 levels when China's out on the market looking for so much food because of the massive floods last year? Push and pull, supply, demand, geopolitical, which is one of the four factors for the reason for all these food price increases. And also, I've showed a few charts before on different nations and percentages on how much they spent on food. Specifically Pakistan, Afghanistan, 40+% of every month's wages is spent on food. Now, this is broken down by continent, which is pretty interesting in itself. 2017, but this is from Rabobank from 2021, so we'll leave it as pretty current, comparatively with all the other mishmashing going on in this, crisis time and distancing and all this craziness. But South Asia and Africa obviously going to be pinched the most if food prices rise. Latin America, Middle East, North African nations would be second in line. North America will be the very last to experience. Europe and Central Asia going to be second to the last. But you can see in progression where there might be unrest with people going to the streets demanding change, just like they were in 2019. Remember that? 2019, 20-some nations plus were on the streets every week demanding change, and then suddenly, whoa, the bug, no, you can't get on the street, social distance. Massive political change happening. This last weekend was a game changer as well. But the amount of money spent on food, just in general, continentally, this is your hotspot, flaring continental. Get ready for it. Because you hear those sounds of slurp, slurp, puff, puff. That's redistribution of wealth. M2 money supply, global bonds. Oh, we need to save you. And I'll even take you back to 2021, and these prices have continued to rise even further from here. So I wanted to give you a glimpse. February 2021, right into the middle of March. What a difference 6 weeks makes. You think your lives are getting more expensive? I know mine is. And when lumber is at the all-time highest price ever, even to make a cattle panel greenhouse is still going to cost you hundreds, if not $1,000 now, when that thing used to be $300. Because the wood is an enormous amount. The poly sheet, cattle panels themselves, being more self-sufficient is the way to go. 29 tips for fighting inflation at home. I linked this in the description box below the video. Incredible tips here, literally, for anybody that wants to be more self-sufficient. I read through all 29. I picked out a couple of my favorites. Roast and grind coffee at home, which most of us can do. Plus, it's fun if you get the green beans. They're cheaper by pound than they are the roasted. And you can experiment with your own caffeine boost. Baking your own bread's another one. You can get 50-pound bags of flour, sugar, rice, whatever. You're going to think about buying in bulk from this point forward. Holding it, saving it, storing it so you can do more home cooking. Then also utilizing slow cookers called a crock pot. Great idea, because you can put one meal, one piece of meat, veggies, all that kind of stuff. Let it cook down for 6 hours, 8 hours, depending. You can have an entire meal. Then you can eat the leftovers all week, depending on how large the crock pot is. And it's all about making your budget stretch further.